Sam Gilliam's work can be seen in collections here in Madison and of course in national collections and international collections, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Art Institute of Chicago, the Corcoran Art Gallery, to name just a few. Please join me in welcoming back one of Tandem's oldest friends and a wonderful artist, Sam Gilliam.
That's just the case. Appears to be.
Thank you, Paula. Now we'll start the Super Bowl. On the left is actually the video that dates back to the time that we started, Bill and I, to make the more than 1,000 yards of fabric that we traveled to 4 countries. Korea, Finland, East Germany, and Chile. And that one of the great things about the video is that it moves, and it also gives you the idea of what the process is like in space. On the left-hand side, I want to do the usual slide lecture. And since it will pertain primarily to the beginning of those works on the right, Amy encouraged me to try. Last Christmas, my daughter told me that this is the youngest daughter, the one who teases the most, that she would give me my second book by Koolhaas if I would start to read at least the first one. So with one hand, the earlier book I started to read, and the second book I received and started to read, and it fell open to a passage by John Cage. John Cage was having an artist for lunch, and when the artist sat down to eat, he said, "John, what should we do?" And John hopped up and walked to the window and looked out the window, of course, in New York City, and he said, "Do you see those people out there?" He said, "They have all the action. And that means we should do nothing." And if this was Christmas 2000, then I could say, well, for the whole year, I could do absolutely nothing. Except about 2 months later, I was in New York City, and I awakened about 4 in the morning. So I rushed to look out the window. It was raining, and I could see about a mile of yellow cabs going. So I decided, if all those guys are going to work, if all those guys are going to pay their bills, then I'd better go home so I can do something. And that is that.
Sam, I'm terribly sorry. It is a fire alarm, and we will have to clear the building.
The first exhibition of the large-scale drape paintings were at the Corcoran. These works were 10 by 75 feet. The time was 1969. And that this work was also at the Corcoran then in 1969 and has recently been reinstalled. The thing that really made the large-scale paintings work was the fact that they were made on the floor, the fact that they couldn't be controlled, and really the real reason was, of course, is that what was made had to be in your head, so that in addition is that once that one was made, one had to continue to make them. This piece was planned for the Philadelphia Museum in 1976, and it was a piece as exciting as this week has been for me in Wisconsin. As soon as we got the work up in 1976, Hurricane Agnes came up the east coast and, of course, blew the work down. And there were 6 pieces, and much as today is that a museum director told us to get them up and make them stay or take them down. I think the newspapers had such a fun time talking about the fact that there was a small sculpture of Hercules, and they showed the painting draping Hercules, so that actually is that such photographs were an embarrassment. Everything one did was new, or at least new for me at that time, so that the experience of actually making these was done for the first time, was planned for the first time, and of course the excitement was new at least for the audience. This work was 150 yards, was made of polypropylene, and was made for the San Francisco Museum. Once that I had started to make the large pieces, I had to learn to make them small. That meant the ladder in the center of the work, which was for show in Atlanta, and cutting the pieces using the wall itself was a way of relating the pieces more to the wall than actually to the room. Between hurricanes, pieces that were so very, very large, I actually did not sell anything, so I had to start painting again. And that's the most sensible thing that one could do, so that this series of works called the Black Paintings were made also around 1976. The great outdoor piece was done at University of Massachusetts, at which the piece was woven, and when the wind blew, the piece opened up. and that the water went through, and the wind as such also went through, so the work did not come down. And that such discoveries, as well as beginning to work with metal, led to sort of a feeling of being able to exchange from model to the canvas pieces to the metal pieces, and through painting. This model is made for a work that is 30 feet high by 80 feet long, that's built for LaGuardia Airport, the main terminal. And this is the actual work, and it's made of aluminum, and it's made of perforated aluminum, and the perforations are about all of the insignias of the airport. I can tell you that my art career has been more like being a little leaguer. Is that I would do something, maybe I would cry, maybe I wouldn't be successful. And the main thing is that I had to find another way to work, or to make it work, and to literally stay in. A long time ago, I think that's where Bill came in, is that I don't think that Bill and I ever did anything the same way twice. Is that if on Thursday we both went to bed and it was unsolved, on Friday we solved it or said that it was solved. Or we said that it was solved between playing tennis and pitching horseshoes and finding all kinds of Wisconsin beer to drink. Each year as such meant, of course, that I came to Wisconsin to print, or I would find a way to change either the drape paintings or the paintings that I was making, and to keep things going. And the most exciting time for me, at least during that time, were those exhibits that I made in France for about 14 years. And of course, the trips that we made to those 4 countries up until 2 years ago. This is a piece that was made of tobacco muslin and was made for the Speed Museum in Louisville, where I grew up. I might add is that what was being done wasn't all creativity. I had to. I had 3 kids who were growing normally in Washington, who wanted to go to good schools, they said, and they wanted to go to good colleges, and then they want to go to good graduate schools. And they want a car too. So that literally, I think all of this teaches you to work things out and actually literally when you look out the window in New York and you see those yellow taxi cabs, and as opposed to, as John Cage would say, do nothing, you had to do something. And I think that was very important. The slide on the left are actually from the same time that the video is being made on the right, and that there was something that was very exciting about working at Bill's place, is that when the pieces were pulled out for 100 yards and the wood was placed on them, you almost felt the works were finished. They could have been finished because of the 18 people that were helping to actually put the work together. About 8 years ago, I stopped doing things particularly that way with fabric and started making things from birch plywood, using liquid acrylics and actually painting a sheet 4x8 and then reducing it using hinges to the work that you actually wanted to make. From printing and die cutting, I started to cut these sort of holes into the wood, and then when the plywood was cut, the work could be rearranged into making these pieces that were both sculptural and had the potential for being flat. This work is from an exhibit at the Krieger Museum in Washington, and it's called A and Kitty in the Park. And it was sort of a sawhorse sculpture. This is inside the museum. This was a piece that was made for the swimming pool. It's made of, uses styrofoam to float the work, and then the actual work is made of nylon, painted nylon. May I say this? The building is by Philip Johnson, and it makes anyone look good. This piece was done for the library, the sociology library at the University of Michigan. This work called Golden Red also opens back to the wall again, and much like the 76 drape pieces. Not because I just live in Washington, but I did complete this commission for the General Service Administration, which was done for the General Service building in Philadelphia, and it's called The Color of Metals. And it's also made of plywood. And it's 8 feet wide by at least 20 feet high. There's a disc on the back that allows this series of works to turn. And they are made of 5/8 inch plywood, and they are cut the same pattern. And then when the piece is put together, you can look completely through to the wall. One of the things that I really learned was that when I started to make prints 25 years ago, was to continue. Also, the same thing is true with working with the plywood, is that by continuing to work with it, one at least create other things to do, let's say in a better way. And these are all large-scale paintings that are done on the 3/4 inch birch plywood. And that they were great to paint because at least 15 sheets of plywood was painted at the same time before one started to assemble. The assembly was done by a carpenter across the alley from my studio, who had 2 kids in school. Thus is that he was quick to finish whatever I wanted him to, and he did a great job. And he did a great job because he didn't want me to hire someone else. Once that I had changed from canvas to nylon, is that one continued to use the nylon until that one begins to make boxes, and that is the plywood piece. These are all recent plywood pieces that are sort of a variation of maybe some you've seen before. This is a nylon drape piece that's made for the atrium of the Chrysler Museum in Norfolk. And this is a installation of boxes. The boxes are 12 inches cube. They're made of nylon, and the nylon is painted with a liquid acrylic. These works are all about 18 inches in scale. And this, as such, represents the last exhibit that I have just finished in Washington. Just as soon as one started to make the drape pieces out of nylon, we switched back to canvas. And that is to say, the we being the persons who help you to construct them. And I know that the reason that one switched back to canvas is that one found a way to paint the canvas as intensely as the nylon. Those are the slides. And I thank you.
Turn the static off here.
Would you like to take questions?
Yes, a few.
Sam would be delighted to take questions if anyone has any.
Would you like the lights on?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your works at Tandem Press now that you're working on?
They're flat. They're flat color. And they go through the press, as Bill said, a very limited number of times, and they are specifically about color. And one of the interesting things is that Andy and Bill helped me to conceive of the idea of printing on veneer, which would be like the raked textured marks using paint. So in 3 days, we've been able to work faster than before. Even though there were storms, we've still accomplished what we really wanted to. And I think most of it has to do with the fact of 25 years. Being a veteran of 25 years, printing is that these things were done. And they're actually for the wall. I mean, I don't know that I looked at them as prints, but ways of working directly, making something directly for the wall, something that flattens out, something that's matted, something that will be framed. And the color and the activity is particularly for the wall. And they are new. But they aren't necessarily, it's that nothing is entirely new. I mean, in the sense that it's a part of something that's happened a long time ago. It's just, they're just done better. Yes.
Did I understand you to say that the plywood was cut, die cut? Or how'd you make those holes?
The paper is die cut, but the in the plywood, the holes are made with a router,
How thick is the plywood?
3/4 inch. But the real interesting thing is that the holes are routed before the actual pattern for the work is drawn, so that you get, it's arbitrary when it comes, when it's routed, and then it's a lot of fun to put it back together. I learned that from Bill. That is true. It's that work could be of the highest necessity and could be most serious, and Bill would put on a record. Or at least when he was in Barneville, he would go up to the second floor and stand in the silo and blow a saxophone, so that you were always relaxed and ready to work. Would I dare say thank you?